Memories. Okay, folks, it's time for Mike's Pro Wrestling Memories. So if you're not a pro wrestling fan, please watch something else on my YouTube channel, Mike's Original Films, Blood Sugar, Sid Ace, The Impeccable, etc. Pro wrestling fans, you're still with me. This photograph, a young Mike Messier took himself on the t-shirt. Contact me if you want a special Mike Messier Sabu Taz t-shirt. So here's the deal. April 13th, 1997 was the day that ECW arrived at the dance. As Paul Heyman said in that behind-the-scenes footage of the event from the movie Beyond the Mat. Now, little did we know, and I just want to preface this because it's kind of in my system, that Paul Heyman, or Paul E. Dangerously, his wrestling name in WCW and other places, he kind of sold us, meaning the fans and even the wrestlers, I believe, on the notion that ECW was this total independent thing, when in fact he was getting some supplemental support from the WWF at the time, which I don't think most of the wrestlers or any of them knew. But Paul Heyman, who's kind of a backdoor deal maker, had a little bit of help from the WWF, but not enough to stay out of bankruptcy and go under. And ECW, when they went to TNN, you can watch other videos about that. Let's concentrate on my memoirs from Barely Legal, ECW pay-per-view. Now, at the time, some of you might know that Eric Koulos New Jack situation had taken place in November of the previous year, 1996, in Revere, Massachusetts. And so that the pay-per-view, I believe they were trying to get pay-per-view before April of 97, but that incident threatened ECW. The reputation of the company was tarnished quite a bit by the New Jack Eric Koulos incident in Revere. So to even get to pay-per-view in April, other people can tell you the stories. There's documentaries about such a thing, Barbed Wire City, the ECW doc by the WWE, other docs I'm sure that I'm forgetting. But here we go. My personal experience. I had been doing press, believe it or not, for ECW in the New England area for Burlington, Mass. I believe it was my first show as a press member, and then Revere, Mass, and then Webster and Waltham. And all those shows were a lot of fun, with the exception, really, of that Koulos incident. I think of all the ECW shows I went to, there was only one that I remember being disappointed by, to be honest with you. And that was by the standard of other ECW shows. One of the best shows was Valentine's Day, 1997, I think, in Webster, Mass. It was either Webster or Waltham. I get those two places mixed up, but I think it was the Webster, maybe the Ibu Hall. And they did have a situation, there were some TV tapings going on, and that's when I think the Sandman joined the Blue World Order for 5 minutes. They had Brian Lee and Chris Candido versus the Eliminators on that Valentine's Day show, and Killer Kowalski was there and so forth. But moving forth, also the Michinoku Pro wrestlers debuted on that show with great help to Sheldon Goldberg, of all people, from New England Championship Wrestling. He was the I don't know what to call him, the liaison with Michinoku Pro and ECW, from what I recall. So here we go. What did I think of this Barely Legal show? Well, I was in attendance. There's a brief moment, if you look between, sounds a little odd, but if you look beyond Taz, between Taz's thighs, basically, when he's about to suplex Sabu in the middle of their match, you can see a young Mike Messier wearing a Taz t-shirt in the audience. I was at the show. I took photographs of the show. I'll try to get them up here on YouTube somehow. I enjoyed the fuck out of it. It wasn't even my favorite ECW show, to be honest. That would have been the February 14th show in the previously described, which had 11 matches. Tommy Rich versus Tommy Dreamer, I believe. All types of good stuff. As far as Barely Legal goes, just the memoirs, the memories. Going into the event, we could smell a fresh coat of paint, literally. Like, Bruce Pritchard would say, a fresh paint of coat, but a fresh coat of paint on that bingo hall. First time I was at the bingo hall. We saw Raven going into the arena with a big bag. I think I even took a photograph of that situation. I remember thinking that we were seeing Dean Malenko, yes, who is still in WCW at the time, because I believe that WCW was doing a Nitro in Philly the next night. But I believe we saw Dean Malenko was there in attendance. And so, everybody wanted this thing to happen. And little did we know in the audience the situation with the electricity and the generator, and how the fans around the world watching on pay-per-view were lucky that the generator didn't blow out, and ECW was really lucky, because if the electricity went out before the show ended, oh, what a catastrophe. And apparently that's what happened, because I'll jump ahead. After the show, Paul Heyman did a little speech to the crowd, and there was no microphone available for him. There was just no energy for a microphone. So Paul Heyman had to do a thank you speech with no mic and just yelling at the top of his lungs. But it felt like something special. How I felt after watching the end of the show was I felt like I had just witnessed another man's dream come true, another man's goal, I should say, not a dream, but an accomplishment. And at the time, that would have been, in my mind, I was thinking Paul Heyman. In retrospect, Tommy Dreamer, Bubba Ray Dudley, Taz, all those wrestlers, Devon Dudley, Rob Van Dam, all those guys that put their asses on the line and worked through injuries and the pain pills. Rick Rude was on that show, Brian Lee, the Eliminators, the Dudleys, all these guys that are gone. Not all those guys are dead, but many of them have been deceased for a while. We miss them, and it's sad. ECW did have a very 90s culture. I mean, this was the 90s. I mean, there was a song by Weezer, New Jack putting, Johnny Grunge put New Jack through a press table in one of the Weezer songs. So, I mean, ECW was becoming a thing. There was action figures for ECW. There was an album, a CD, okay, with, I believe, Sandman on the cover, which, of course, by the time the CD came out, Sandman was in WCW. But in any event, ECW, it's kind of like just when they were getting somewhere, they were done. And it's one of those things that's hard to wrap your head around. Was ECW a success or a failure? And ultimately, it was both. I mean, I think it was a creative success. I think business-wise, and I think Paul Heyman's man enough to admit this and has, he wasn't a great businessman, and maybe ECW should have reached out to a marketing team or someone else to help them with their books and so forth and wrangle the money. And apparently the pay-per-view money caused more problems than it was worth, because the wrestlers were expecting these big paychecks, and sometimes those paychecks would come in months or years after the shows. So I can feel for Heyman and ECW. Maybe they were in over their head. But it's too bad, because even now, I mean, we're talking 20 fucking years later, after that company went out of business, you still hear the chants. You still hear the call of the wild of ECW. They just had a connection to the fans that very few promotions have had. The only one I can think of that had such a personal connection was probably World Class Championship Wrestling with the Von Erichs. And I don't think that people connected with WCW like they did with ECW. And to a tinge, in a different degree, WWE or WWF does to some folks, but not to a lot. Just ECW, if you were an ECW fan, you were hardcore. And the show, it's interesting. The Dudleys, I tried to do this video earlier and I got interrupted, so I might upload my other version. But the Dudleys were there, and they were defending their first championship of many, not only in ECW, but at the time, people thought of the Dudleys tag team as kind of a joke, a novelty team. And here they were defending the titles, and they kind of got squashed by the Eliminators. And everybody was thinking the Eliminators were going to be this great, awesome team. But, you know, they weren't even around. I think by the time they did the next pay-per-view, they were more or less done. You know what I mean? Or shortly thereafter, because Perry Saturn went over to WCW by the end of the summer, I think. 97. 97 was just a great year otherwise in pop culture, folks. I mean, it's just, I don't know how to explain it. You just get to that point where you try to explain things to people and it's hard because they were either there or they weren't. But 97 was kind of like one of those years, like people reminisce about 1969 or whatever the fuck. 97 was kind of like that. A lot of great music, a lot of one-hit wonders. With that song, the Sugar Ray had a big song. The Way, it was a big song. You had, I don't know if the Bare Naked Fuckheads had come out yet or not, but you had Sugar Ray, you had that song, The Way. You had all these wonderful things. I think people were finally getting over Kurt Cobain being dead. I'm talking about young people at the time. What else? 90-7. Jenny McCarthy was a big thing. Carmen Electra. Dennis Rodman was fucking them, having sex with them. That was exciting for people. And you had this ECW. And Extreme Championship Wrestling. And, I mean, to some highlights, Shane Douglas swearing out the crowd. You know, his speech was wonderful. The Shane Douglas speech of Barely Legal was great. What else? Francine in her breasts, and Rick Rude in the mask, and Brian Lee was revealed, and all these wonderful things. From a wrestling standpoint, you can probably say that triangle match, that ladder match, took up too much time. Although people kind of jerked a circle about it later. Stevie Richards versus Terry Funk versus Sandman. Maybe Stevie Richards' greatest match ever. Maybe the Sandman's, you know, I don't know. But it was a match that it seemed to go a little long, which I think is why the main event of Raven versus the winner, Terry Funk, was rushed. But people did enjoy it. I think it was runner-up for Match of the Year, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. You had all these wonderful things. Was it? I'm trying. Who was the fucking guy that was in the FBI? JT Smooth or JT? God damn it! He was like a TV champion. He was the first guy in the FBI, African American man, wrestler. He came back at ECW Barely Legal and wrestled in the dark match with the FBI. And there was also a Louis Spicoli won a match. I don't know if it was over Bobby Duncombe Jr. or somebody. But there was 2 matches on the dark show, like before the show, dark matches. Tommy Dreamer famously gave up his match at the pay-per-view to allow Terry Funk into the thing. I'll be honest with you, and this is just honesty. No offense to Terry Funk. I love Terry Funk like everyone else. I kind of don't understand. Like, to me, they put a lot of emphasis on Terry Funk for this show. And I think it might have been a better idea to push maybe a Stevie Richards or push a Sandman to win that title. I mean, it's 25 years later. But I don't know if Terry really needed that title. It was more like a tribute thing. But they were telling the story for months. So, anyway, I think for a promotion that was trying to be like the hip young guys in some regard, I'm not sure if giving the belt to Terry creatively made sense. It really didn't, except he was just a cult favorite and just a embodiment in some ways of ECW. Axel wasn't on the show. Axel Rotten, I think Balls Mahoney was not on the show. They were there, but not in the matches. It was always disappointing when, like, a couple of guys, like Balls and Axel were always those guys you really enjoyed, and it's just sad that they didn't get to wrestle on the first pay-per-view. I'm sure, I don't know if they were disappointed or not. Axel might have been. He put a lot of blood and guts into those tape-high matches. The Sabu Taz match. Very stiff, it appeared, as a fan. Hard-hitting. Great match. I like that match a lot. Probably my favorite match on the show. I was on Team Taz, #. But I liked Sabu as well. I liked them both. The Michinoku Pro guys. Nice to see Hayabusa and Taka Michinoku and the other guys. Gran Amata and Dick Togo and so forth. Lance Storm was there. Rob Van Dam won. That's a great match. Lance Storm was just one of those guys who, I don't know, like maybe he was born too soon. Like maybe Lance Storm, 10 or 15, like could Lance Storm have filled the shoes of Daniel Bryan? Were their time frames be reversed? Possibly. It just didn't seem to connect. Chris Candido did a little speech because he couldn't wrestle. He had a broken wing, an arm. I was just talking about Chris Candido. I was trying to explain to a friend of mine, kind of a casual fan, if you would, the history of Sonny fucking Shawn Michaels with Chris Candido, not knowing about it, trying to explain that to my buddy. For some reason, he saw something about Sonny from like the 90s and was all excited, and I had to explain to him all these situations with her being a whore. The Shane Douglas Pitbull thing, I guess they really had to script this show, which is something that ECW typically didn't like to do, but they had to present a script, and they had to fight for the director. You can watch so many, Barbed Wire City or the ECW doc. You can watch so many things about this. I guess here's the thing. As a fan at the time, you felt like you were in on something, like you were helping. And I guess that's why I can see people when they feel about AEW the way they feel now. They feel maybe even about Impact Wrestling or whatever. But when you're a wrestling fan to a non-dominant company, okay, you feel like your viewership and your patronage helps the cause. So that's why I can understand when people get all excited about AEW or Impact or whatever the fuck. You feel like you're fighting the man. I don't know. I mean, I could go by a match-by-match analysis. I'm trying not to discredit anyone by not talking about their matches. But I guess I mean, you could go other places for a match-by-match. What was my favorite? One of my favorite moments on the show was Shane Douglas's promo before his match. And God, do I even have a favorite match on the show? I do. Sabu and Taz. That was my favorite match. Okay, every year around April 13th, I get excited. I think back to those times, and just life is just a lightning bolt, man. We're talking 24 years ago, and it just seems like 2 weeks ago, a month ago. Life is a fucking lightning bolt, baby. You gotta ride it. You gotta ride that lightning bolt. Look at that nice sky. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. That's my analysis. You can take it. You can leave it. There was just a certain attitude of ECW, and I guess I'll do another video, but I went to that Extreme Reunion show, in 2012, and was trying to recapture something, but I don't know if it could ever be recaptured. You could have glimpses, you could have memories, but I don't know if what was accomplished in 1997 with ECW, at least what we thought we were accomplishing as fans and as the promotion, not knowing that Paul Heyman was in cahoots with McMahon. We thought we were changing the world, and we were.